Hey guys, today we are going to get our planner document set up in InDesign so that we can start creating our new planners the right way. Making sure you have everything set up correctly from the beginning is really going to help you to avoid some possible time costing mistakes later down the road. Let me just say to please excuse my voice. The reason why I'm so late in getting this video out is I've been a bit under the weather and I have not quite had a voice the last few days. So hopefully you'll be able to hear me and understand me throughout this video. Okay, because this series is intended to help anyone create any type of planner they want, I will be going over some different document setups as well as setting up parent pages, styles, backgrounds, and adding color swatches. So no matter what type of planner you're trying to make, whether it be digital, printed, or printable, I will go through all of them today on how to set up your document. But let me first get this out of the way. Of course, I need to mention it that if you're planning to follow along with this series, then it goes without saying that you're going to need to have InDesign in order to do so. As of filming this video, Adobe is offering a 7-day free trial and then just $22.99 a month for InDesign or $59.99 a month for access to all of the Adobe products that are in the Creative Cloud. Included in both of these is the premium version of Adobe Express as well, which is definitely a really nice thing to have when you're running a business. So if you do not have the program yet and you want to sign up, I would greatly appreciate if you use the link in my description. I may make a small commission from it at no cost to you, of course, but it helps me make these free tutorials for you guys. Now, with that out of the way, let's jump into InDesign here and we will start creating our new documents. The first part's going to be different depending on the different types of planners. You're going to want to set up your document according to the format and size of the planner you're wanting to make, of course. So let's go over the different choices that you have to make and what you need to think about. Some things that you want to think about when you're setting up your document is what format are you going to be using? What size planner are you going to be making? Will you be wanting colors or images to go all the way to the edge? So in other words, are we going to need a bleed all the way around? And will you be needing room for hole punching? And this is really all stuff that we went over in episode 2 of the series when we were coming up with our designs for our planners. So you should really know the answers to all of these questions. The answer to these questions are what is going to determine how you're setting up your actual document. So first, we're going to talk about digital planner setup, because this is really kind of the easiest setup. So when you go to create a new document, so we're going to come up here to File and New and Document. The easiest thing to do is to come right up here to the top and start with web. So you have to do your research on what size. Again, we went over this in episode 2, but there are plenty of resources on the web for the best sizes to use for programs like GoodNotes. That's the most popular one. So that's usually what I just go by. So if you're unsure what is going to look best, I would create a sample document, export it, bring it into the program, see how it looks. Think about whether you're wanting to create like a portrait view or landscape view. This is going to determine the dimensions that you use. And the sizes that I use in my landscape planner is 1200 pixels by 768 pixels. This is what I use. This is my preference. I would recommend having a minimum of 650 by 406, but I prefer to go with 1200 by 768. For portrait, my recommendation for that is 1530 by 1960, but minimum you should have is 455 by 488. Those are my recommendations. Again, do your research, figure out what's going to work best for you, but quite simply, you're just going to go ahead and you're going to put your sizes in here. It's already set up as pixels. So we're going to go with the landscape one, and we're going to go with my recommended that I like is 1200 by 768 pixels. For digital, you're going to see facing pages here is unchecked because we are just going to be doing this as a single page, whether you make it look like it's 2 facing pages like an open planner or not. That's still technically 1 page. So obviously we're in landscape, it automatically chooses that based on, which of these is larger. And we don't need to worry about bleeds for digital because those are for cutting purposes and printing purposes. You can create some margins if you would like. I don't know if it's necessary, so you can just leave this here because you're not worried about anything being cut off. That's not as important. That's why I say this is one of the easiest ones to set up. And then this looks pretty good. So from here, you would just hit create and you're going to see this is what it's going to look like, your landscape view in one page, which is different than we've seen so far, unless you've checked out my how to create a digital planner video. That is on my channel. I'll link it in the description if you want to check that out specifically for the digital planners. But this is generally how you're going to start. Okay, so next I want to talk about printed planners. I want to talk about this before we get to the printable. These will be the planners that you intend to print yourself or you have sent to a printer or manufacturer to have printed. So we'll have to make a few adjustments for printable planners. So a little more can go into that, and that's why I want to mention that after this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here again to File, New Document. We can go over here to the Print tab. InDesign uses Pigas. I think I'm saying that. I think that's how you say it. I never use that, so you can use that if you're familiar with it, but I usually like to go to inches. If you're not in the United States, maybe you want to do millimeters or something like that, but I prefer to do inches. Just keep in mind that if you are sending these off to a printer, if you already have a printer, you may want to check with them and see if they have a preference for any of this, but I wouldn't imagine the actual unit of measure matters. But you could check if you already have a printer, but you can also always convert this later. So you're going to want to make sure facing pages is on. That's what's creating our spread. So make sure that that one's checked. I am going to go ahead and use my typical planner size, 7x9. That's usually what I go with. So now we're going to set margins. This is going to be your safe area that you're going to want to keep any important text and images in that you do not want to get cut off. Essentially, everything except for maybe a background image or color should be within these margins. This will just be your preference. So you'll want to have an inside margin larger to allow room for hole punching or journal binding, whatever way you plan on binding this planner. You will want to add a minimum of an extra 1/4 inch around the edge. So it looks like InDesign comes with a 1/2 inch already in there. I find that way excessive in my opinion, but I would go with a minimum of a 1/4 inch would be my recommendation. And as I say that, I'm going to tell you the margins I use in my planner are actually 0.1969, which is a little less than a 1/4 inch. But it does work for me just fine. And then this inside one here, that's the one I'm talking about. That's going to be where you're going to punch the holes. Again, you may want to check with your manufacturer if you're having these manufactured and you already have a manufacturer. As long as you're close, it's not too difficult to adjust a little bit later if you don't have a printer yet, and then later your printer's like, I need whatever it may be, a little more than a 1/4 inch. When you're just adjusting a little bit, that's not going to be too big of a deal if you need to do that later. But if you start with 0.25, that would be fine in my opinion. The margin I use for my planner is 0.1969, and then for the inside 0.55. I print them myself, I punch them and bind them, and I cut them myself, and I bind them with a wire binding. So again, you can create and print a sample to try it out, put it in your hole punch, and see if it works before you create the whole document like that. Again, I mean, it can be changed later, but do you really want to have to go back and do it? So I'm going to go ahead and set this up the way I usually have it set up. So 1969 is usually what I use, even though I just told you at least a 1/4 inch, but close enough. And then 0.55 for my inside margin here. And now we are going to look at bleeds. Okay, so as far as bleed goes, you really only need this if you intend on having anything going to the edge of the page. So although it doesn't hurt to add this, generally speaking, it should really be a minimum of 0.125. So that's 1/8 inch. Keep in mind, some printers may require or ask for 0.25, which is a 1/4 inch, but you can always adjust that later if you need to, and if you don't have a printer yet to ask. But again, like I said before, always check with your printer if you already have one. So let's go ahead here and let's add our bleed. Let's just add a 0.125 bleed, and we're just going to hit create. Okay, so you can see the red line around the outside here, the bleed. So there's something I want to mention here about these bleeds. And if you've watched my other videos, I have mentioned this before, so you may have heard of it. You've heard me say it. So when you're designing using spreads, you're not going to have an inside bleed here. The pages are butted up right against each other, so creating pages that need an inside bleed require kind of a workaround. If you want your entire document to have a background that extends to the edge of the page, and you're not planning to have it hardbound, because if you're going to have it hardbound, it really doesn't matter. But for any other binding method where these pages are going to need to be cut down, then we're going to want to make adjustments now when we're creating the document. If you're just planning on having maybe a couple pages with the full background, maybe just certain sections, then you don't need to worry about it during your actual document setup. Just have your regular bleeds. I will show you the workaround later if you want to just do it for certain pages or sections. But I needed to mention it now because if you want the whole document to be that way, maybe you have like a color or a texture that you want in the background or graphics, then we need to do it now it's set up. So let's do this again. We're going to go to document new. We're going to do this. I'm going to go back to print here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm changing to inches and we're doing 7. I'm just going to set up just like I had the other one set up, and then I'll show you what's going to be different about it. So let's make this easy. I'm just going to do easy 0.25 and 0.5. That's the easiest way to do that. Okay, again, I did go over this in the last video, the episode 3, the tips and tricks video. I did show this. So if you watch that video and you already know how to do this, you can go ahead and just skip to the next part. But I want to show this again just in case you did not watch that video. So if you want the bleeds all the way around, we're going to have to make some adjustments here in actually creating the document. The adjustment to get the inside bleed is to add the desired bleed amount to your actual document size. So in other words, if you want your bleed to be 0.125 or 1/8 of an inch, we need to add 1/8 of an inch to each side, which means the width will be 0.25, so 1/4 of an inch bigger because you have 2 sides for the width, and then you have 2 sides for the height as well. So we're going to go ahead and add 0.25 to that as well. So now we've made our actual document 1/4 of an inch bigger on each side to account for that bleed. Now what we also need to do is we need to adjust our margins, because the margins are measured 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the page. We want the document to still end up in the end once it's cut still being 7 by 9, so we need to add that margin, those extras down here. So on each of these we're going to say plus 0.125 plus 0.125. Let's go ahead and just make this 0.375, and then, plus 0.125. Okay, so we've now added that to our margins here so that our margins are exactly where they would be if your planner was still set up as 7 by 9. So now we can say create, and you're going to see here all of these margins are bigger than they are on our first document. So you can then just take your background image to the corner of the page, and it already has a built-in bleed right for you. Still use your margins here the same way you would use them when you're creating any documents, and keep all your important stuff, all of your actual document information aside from background within that box, and you are good to go. I also mentioned in the planner tips and tricks video that once you do this, you might have trouble visualizing where your bleeds actually are. And one thing that you could do is you could create guides, ruler guides, in order to just show you where those bleeds are if you would like to visualize it. As long as you have these rulers showing. If you don't, just go to view and come down here to rulers. It says hide rulers, but if you're not seeing them, you come down and it will say show rulers. And then you click, hold, and drag from the side, and you can bring it over to wherever you need to bring it. So we bring it to point. It's giving me trouble. 0.125. I'm just going to go through this quickly. If it's too quick for you, head on over to the tips and tricks video and watch this trick in more depth. But once that's there, I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to go to Object, Transform, Move. I'm going to move it over 7 inches. And then we're going to say copy because we want to leave the original one there. Copy. So now you can see I have an inside and an outside bleed showing, and then you can just do the same for the top. So again, highlight, object, transform, move, and this time you're going to put 9 inches vertically, hit copy, and now you have your top and bottom. And then once you're done filling all those out, you can go back to view, and you can go to grids and guides, and you can lock the guides so that they don't move around while you're working. And these, of course, will not show up on your finished document. Again, if I went too fast and you want more detail, just head back over to the last video, the tips and tricks video, and I go through it in a little more detail in that video. Finally, let's talk about printable planner setup. So this is a planner that's intended to be sold to your customers digitally, but it's meant to be printed. So it's not used digitally. So you might think that this would be just the same as the printed version. But it really depends on what type of printed planner you're selling. If the planner that you're selling is just meant to be printed as is, so like you literally have it set up like this document, like you would print it at home. It's not meant to be customized or print however many number of pages you want. You've got them all in there. It's just meant to be printed, bound, and thrown into, like hole punched and thrown into a binder or something like that. Then sure, you can go ahead and you can create it the exact same way. But most often that's not how you're going to offer a printable planner. You want them to be able to customize it. So let's say you're planning on offering an undated planner. You want it to be printable. They can print however many pages they want. It's undated. You don't know how many daily or weekly they're going to need for each month. So it needs to be up to them as to how many they need to print of each of these pages, right? Or maybe have add-on sections. In this case, we're going to have to set things up a little bit differently, because if you see here, you have the inside margin is bigger than the outside, because we already know, let's go to this one that's a little less confusing looking. We already know what page is going to be on what side. We know exactly how this document is going to be set up. If you don't know how many pages they're going to need to print, you don't know which side the margin needs to be on. And so for that reason, you really want to try to keep at least the margins on the left and the right the same. And this way they can print it on the front or the back. It doesn't really matter how many they print or where they print those pages. They're still going to be able to print them out and cut them. And that's really the big difference. So when you're thinking about setting up the document, I would go ahead and I would set it up the same basically, but I would have the outside margins the same as the inside margins. Another thing to think about is background images and colors. So I would try to avoid anything that would print right to the edge of the page, because you would not want to assume your customer has a printer that's capable of doing this, because not all printers do. I find it best to avoid these types of designs for printable planners. Not to say that you can't, but I would warn the customer beforehand that it will require them to have a printer that prints the edge. That, or you leave a white border around on your design on purpose, and let that show in the picture so your customer knows. Don't just assume that they would know, or that they would think about, when they're looking to purchase the planner, like, do I need to print this to the edge? How is this gonna, look? You want to show that in the image, and you want to let them know all of this, and best to think about this beforehand. Other than that, you should be able to set up your document for a printable planner just like you do for the printed planners. One other thing you might want to consider is what size you're creating. I would recommend sticking to a size paper that can be commonly found and printed on, or just stick with letter. You can just go to Amazon and see some other types of paper that's pretty common on there to purchase. Or if you have a particular size you're wanting, then I would just search for the paper to make sure that size is going to be available for your customers. Because again, you don't want them to have to cut things down, because they're probably not going to have a cutter for that. So Your best option, in my opinion, is just to stick with the common sizes. Okay, so now we're ready to start creating pages. In this video, we're just going to create the cover page and set up our backgrounds, just to jump in a little bit and start getting our document set up. So, because in the next 12 videos or so, we're going to be creating different pages. Okay, so I am going to go in and I'm going to create my document that we are going to be using for this series. And I'm going to do it just like I said. We're doing a 7x9 because that's my favorite size planner. I'm just going to use what I usually use, 0.1969 by 0.55. I'm going to add a bleed of 0.125, and I'm going to create the document that we will now be using, or I will be using throughout the rest of this series. Okay, so now we're going to create the cover page. For the cover page, you can create this right in the document. So here, this is the first page. Oops, coming down here in the document. Because there's only going to be one per document for the whole planner, so you don't really need a parent page for it. But we're going to go ahead and we are going to create a parent page so we can start working in there and you can start getting used to working with them. Plus, I also wanted to show you how you can delete one. So for the first page, we're not going to have a left page because there's no back of a page that doesn't exist. So we only need one page here. So if you wanted to delete this left page, when you're in the parent pages, just double click so it's highlighted in blue and hit delete. Say okay. And now you just have one page, the margins on the correct side. We've always wanted it towards the middle. And now we can go ahead and rename this. So we're going to right click and then come to parent options for a parent. I'm just going to name this cover page. And based on none, and we only want the one page. Okay, so now here you could add your logo at the top of the page. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a text box that says logo here, and this will be for your logo. Let's go ahead, let's center this. Let's make this April. Let's go ahead and let's make this 32. Okay, so now we have that here. I want to make sure that this is centered. I have centered it in this box, but where I want this to be centered is not to the page, but to the margin. Because this margin is thicker, but once it's punched, your eye's only going to see from about there to there. So it's most often going to be better to center within the margin. So if you want to do that with the box selected, you have these options here. You're also going to have them down here if you have yours set up the same way I do in Essential Classics. Either way is going to be fine, but what you want to look at here is this little align to selection is what's selected. So if you click that little arrow, it's going to give you these options. You can align to selection, which typically you have to have two things selected. I don't know why it's coming up that way. You can align to the page, you can align to the whole spread, or align to margins is what I'm going to use most often in InDesign. So if you click that now, it's going to, when you click this, is going to line things up according to the margins. So let me just go back. Let's center it here. Okay, so next what I want to do is we're going to add some lines above and below this text box here. So we can come over here to the line tool, click on that. I'm just going to create it maybe a little bit bigger. So you're going to click and hold, and as you drag the mouse, you're going to see a line being created. Now, if you want to make sure that you keep this line perfectly level, you're going to hold shift, and it's going to make sure it stays level no matter which way you pull it. So I'm going to do it about there. I'm going to go ahead and I am going to, oh, that's already 1 point. So let's go ahead and let's leave that as 1 point. Now I want another line underneath it. I am going to click and hold, And then before I start dragging, I'm going to hold Option or Alt, and then I'm going to hold, so if you hold that and I start coming up and down, but if I want to keep it straight up and down, what am I going to do? I'm going to hold Shift. So that's going to keep it level. So I can just then drag it down to there. Sometimes you'll see the original still there. Sometimes it disappears and it looks like you're not copying it, that you're just moving it. I'm not sure why it does that, but either way. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to group. So I'm going to grab on. I don't want to grab on to, let me make this text box smaller because I don't want to grab onto these guys. Okay, let's grab onto, we're going to select both of these lines. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but if you wanted to select more than one thing, I mean, obviously selecting one, you just click on it. If I then want to select something else, I'm just going to hold Shift while I click on whatever else I want to add, and then it will select both of them. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to group these together because it just makes it a lot easier for lining things up. So shortcut for this is going to be Command G, but you can always click, right click, and then click group. So now these are going to be one group. So if you move one, you move them all. So I want to center these together. Here is where you would use the option to center based on a selection. So I'm going to select both of these. Yes, it's three things, but you have the text and then you have the group. I want to center the text in between these two lines. So in order to do it by selection, you highlight everything and then you click on the item that you want everything to be based on. So if I want this logo to be centered on between these lines, it's going to be based on where the lines are. So now once you do that, it's going to automatically change this over here to key object. Then I can go ahead and I can center it and then center it vertically. So I centered it vertically and horizontally. Okay, so now we have our logo here, or what your logo will be in the center of the page. We want to come down here and I'm going to create a new text box. And I'm going to create one that says planner name, which of course you would name it whatever your planner name is if you have a planner name. Let's go ahead and center this. Let's choose a different font. I do have a font in mind. I like this font. And we are going to do it in the bold. And we are going to do it at 32-point font. 32 font. So that's the name of our planner. And here's where we're going to start to set up some styles. So styles, I want to mention first because I think that it's a good thing to do as you go. You want to set styles up as you go. It makes things a lot easier, and that is the whole reason for styles. You can technically go back and add the styles after if you want to, but kind of defeats the purpose of using the styles. So keep in mind that you don't necessarily need to know exactly which font, size, color, etc. That you want to use. You don't necessarily need to know that now. You probably want to get close to the size as you're setting things up to make sure things fit. But the important thing here is that you categorize your different areas and your styles. So in other words, you may want all of your page headers to be the same, right? So every page header you have in your planner is probably going to be the same size, the same font at the very least, same color. So what you can do as you go, even if you don't necessarily know exactly which font you want to use, you would still just create a style called page headers, and then you would apply that to each one as you go. So later on, when you want to go ahead and pick your font, you can just change that style and it will change everything connected to that style, and you don't have to go through the whole planner. So because it can so easily be changed, that is the purpose of using them. Just go ahead, if you don't know yet for sure, and just start categorizing your things and creating styles for them. This will make more sense as we go through. And before we move on, I want to explain the difference between character and paragraph styles really quickly. Character styles capture the information about a set of characters like font size, color, stroke, etc. Okay, paragraph styles capture the information included in the character styles, plus the paragraph attributes as well. Character styles can be applied to individual characters and words as well as entire paragraphs. Paragraph styles can only be applied to the entire paragraph. So you just want to keep this in mind when you're designing your planner, in case you may want to have certain characters different. Maybe the first letter or the first word of something you might want to have different. In most cases in this type of application, either is going to work fine. I just am probably going to use all paragraph styles, most likely. I don't do a lot of having one letter different. And you can apply a character style within paragraph that has a paragraph style applied to it. So you can have multiple layers to it. It gets a little confusing sometimes. You can do it. So it's not the end of the world. So I probably will stick with paragraph styles, but I don't think that choosing one or the other is really going to affect you too much in this type of document. When you're talking text heavy documents like books and magazines and things like that, it might be a little bit different. It might be more important to establish the difference. But for this purpose, I really wouldn't think too much about it, but I just wanted to mention it. Okay, so now that we understand the paragraph styles and the character styles, I'm going to create a paragraph style from this because this is what I'm going to want to use for the same font for my page headers. I have the different styles here in this little bar. If you don't see this, if you don't have this on yours, and you can find paragraph styles, just come up to Window and then come down to Styles. And then you'll see here all the different styles you can choose from. And if you click Paragraph, it will bring the box up for you. And I closed it because I already had it up. Or anyway, once you have this window up with the text that you're wanting to create a style for highlighted, just come down to this little plus here, click it, it will create a new paragraph style. You can then double click, and we're going to change this to whatever grouping you want it to be a part of. For this, I'm going to do page headers. You can see here the different settings, the different attributes that they're saving as part of this style. Right now, they're just doing the font, bold, the point, and then it's aligned center. You can come down if there was more that you wanted, information that you wanted it to have. Again, this is just 2 words. It's not a whole paragraph, so there's not a whole lot that I need to set up, but there are tons of different things you can set up about it. As you come down to set up paragraph options, there's a ton here, but I'm just going to go ahead and leave whatever it has set here, and I'm going to say okay. So now I have here paragraph styles as a page headers as a paragraph styles. So now when I want to come down here and I'm going to create a new text box, let's say belongs to, okay? What I can do, I'm going to highlight this, or because I'm using a paragraph style, you can just be clicked in it. I want to go ahead and make this the same style as here. So all I need to do with my cursor in here is to click page headers, and it's going to apply that style. So now we have our first style created and we've applied it. So the only thing I had left that I wanted to do here is I wanted to add some more lines down here so that the customer can write their name in their planner. So I'm going to do like I did before, come over here, click on the line tool. I'm going to make these a little bit wider. I'm going to click, hold, and drag, and I'm going to hold shift to keep it level. Okay, let go. Now I am actually going to change this to a thinner stroke. I like a half a stroke. I don't like the dark, heavy lines. And now I'm going to copy this so that we have 2 lines. So I'm going to click and hold. I'm holding Option or Alt on Windows, and then Shift to keep it straight, and then I'm dragging down. And how much space do we really need? I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come up here. I'm going to bring that down a little bit. And now I'm going to hit W just to kind of see what it looks like without all the extra lines. I think I might want to move this up a little, but you know, just play around with it. See how it comes out, see how it looks to you. You could just click and then use the arrows to move things around. If you want to make sure they stay centered, let's make sure these are centered. All right, we're all centered up. Okay, so that's our basic cover page here that we've created now. Again, you're probably going to have an actual logo here, an actual planner name here, and there's tons you can do with the cover page, but I really just wanted to like dip our toes in and start to get the feel for all of this, and you can go back and make this as fancy as you want later down the road. But since this is the document set up, I wanted to also show you really quickly how you can use your CC's library over here to add different colors and fonts and different assets if you want to be able to use them throughout the project or through other projects that you might create. So if you click CC libraries here, you can create libraries here for different things. Like, so for example, I have brand assets. So for my brand, I save certain brand assets here. I have my brand colors in here. I have my brand fonts in here, and things like that. And I have an asset here. This is the header for my stickers. So I can just drag it out and then change the necessary information on it. Makes it a lot easier when I'm creating anything in InDesign and Illustrator and Photoshop, and any of them. You can, these CC libraries will be here and these folders will save here. And so you can create them for all different things. I have one for planners. For my planners, it has the colors I use within my planners, the fonts I use in my planners. So you can create your own folder simply by just clicking the plus here and create a new library and then naming it. Just as simple as that. And then when you want to add things to, you just drag them over. Let's say planner series. Oops, can't see what I'm typing. And let's hit create. And now if I want to drag something over here, now you can either drag it over and drop it, and it's telling you it's going to add the text. Or with it selected, you can come over here to the plus sign and see there's, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a little tiny arrow down there. So when you click it to add something, it's going to ask you, what do you want to add? Do you want to add the paragraph style? Do you want to add it as a graphic? Like I showed you with the top part of the sticker page that I use, or do you want to add the text or all? Okay, so that's your CC libraries. Let's talk about adding backgrounds. This is also another important part of setup, especially if you're creating a digital planner. You're probably going to have a background. Most people will. I am not going to get into the specifics of how you create an entire background. If you want to see that, I have a video showing how to create digital planners. Go back and check that one out, because I will show in more detail how you could go about creating your background, so it looks like a open planner and you have all the tabs on the side and all of that. I'm not going to go over all that, but I'm going to show you how you can use the background. So like once you've created it. Okay, while I said I'm not going to show you how to create the actual background for the digital planner, because there's a lot that goes into it, I do want to show you what I mean. So I'm going to show you an example of my digital planner that's in my digital shop. This is the document with nothing. So I've added like a textured background to this because I wanted to have a background behind the actual planner. And so you can see here, that's what it looks like when it's exported. See, all of this is one page, and I've made it look like it's an open planner. All of these little tabs will have links to them. Now, these are going to show on every single page. These are going to have a link to the same page every single time. So you want to only create this one time because it's going to be the same on every page. So you create your background. So I have a background on top of a background, and then I've applied that background to each one of these parent pages. See, they're not clickable, right? Because they're already connected to another page. So you lay this background, you create this background on top of that background, and then all of your planner pages are now created on top of that. So if I want to go and I want to change a link or change something this says, right? Maybe I want to change my colors. I don't have to go through every single one of these pages and do that. All I need to do is go to my planner background page, and then I can just change it here, and it will change it on all of the pages. So let's go ahead and Let's make this something bright so we can see. Okay, so I've now changed that January. Now every page that I go to, every parent page is going to have that changed on it. Every page in my document is going to have that changed on it. And all I had to do, and there are 997 pages with that background applied to it. And all I had to do is change it one time, and it's changed it everywhere. That's why these parent pages are so powerful. If I wanted to change this background, which again appears on every single page, I can go ahead and I can just change this image and it will change it on every page. Now, with that being said, all you need to do in order to apply this to the next page, let's look at the options here. So we have this page, this parent page. Let's look at our parent options for planner background. You can see it's based on parent A, which is that background there. So that's why it's showing in the background. If I come here to our first main page and I look at parent options, you can see it's based on planner background A, which is the one we just saw here. So this one's based on this one, this one's based on this one. And so all of my pages going forward from here are based on the planner background. So that's how that works. That is the digital planner example. So you can see how important it's going to be for a digital planner. It's way more important for a digital planner than a regular planner. For the printed planner, you really only need this if you're actually creating, adding any kind of background graphics. And now we're going to start with the Doggie planner. So over here in our Doggie planner, we are going to add a background. I do have a cute little page. Now I can add it straight to here. So I'll show you that. Let's go ahead and place, I do have a little Doggie one saved that I think is quite cute. Because it's going to go all the way over the page, you want to make sure it comes at least to your bleed lines. So you at least need it to come to your bleed lines. Okay, so he's so cute, isn't he? Okay, so the problem right now is that he is in front of our text. So if you right click, you can come down to, here we go, arrange. You can send backward, which will just send it back one. If you say send to back, it will send it all the way back. And now it's behind all of the text. But I also wanted to show you over here, you can see, you can click, hold, and drag behind wherever you want to drag it behind. Okay, so now also you can tell it's a little hard to see the text on this background. It's a little too dark. So what you can do here is with the picture selected, then you're going to come up here to this little box. This is opacity. And we're going to bring the opacity down until it looks good where we can see our lines. All right, so, he's a little hard to see. Text is a little hard to see on him. So let's go ahead and let's move this around a little bit. We're going to move this up. Let's go ahead and let's see our lines again here. So let's go ahead and move this up a little bit. We'll move this up here. We'll move this up here, and then maybe we just need one line to say belongs to. Maybe we don't need two lines. So let's get rid of this line. Okay, so now he is the center. I'm going to move him up a little bit, and maybe we'll bring the opacity up a little bit more just so we can see him a little bit better. And that's what we're working with. So can level that here. I'm just playing around now at this point. Okay, and so just like that, we have created our Doggie cover page by adding the background. So that's it for today's episode. In the next episode, we're going to get into creating our actual pages, starting with notes pages. So I'm going to show you how to create the lines on line pages, dot grid, grid, and list pages. Okay, so like to-do list. So make sure that you subscribe, you hit the bell notifications so that you don't miss it. And I'm going to see you in the next one.